A few decades ago, Georg Cantor proved that infinity is actually bigger than infinity. This man was hailed as the new Archimedes. The media called him the Mozart of mathematics. And just 2 years later, he was locked up in a psychiatric hospital, never to return. What happened? Why did the mathematical world's darling go insane? We don't know for sure, but we have a few good guesses. And this is the story of how he discovered the shocking secret of infinity. Infinity is an abstract concept. It's not a real number. It's a concept of a number so large that it can never be reached by counting. When I was in school, I remember learning about natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, etc. Then I learned that there are actually more natural numbers than natural numbers. Here's how that's possible. Check it out. Let's take the first infinite series, 1, 2, 3, etc. Now let's add all the even numbers to this series. We get 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. No matter how far you count into the first series, you can always find an even bigger number in the second series. So one infinity is actually bigger than the other. How can infinite be bigger than infinite? Well, it can. That's exactly what Georg Cantor proved in his 1963 paper titled On a Paradox in the Concept of Infinite. Cantor's work led to major advances in many areas of math, including set theory, measure theory, mathematical logic, and the foundations of probability. Many mathematicians considered him to be the greatest mathematician since Nicholas von Humboldt. But then things started to unravel. In 1937, he published a paper describing his vision of a new mathematical paradise where everything would be built on sets. Basically, a universal language of mathematics. Cantor envisioned his paradise as something beautiful, as orderly as the starry sky, as eternal as the sand on the seashore. He wrote, "Here is non-finite space with its infinite stars shining in the firmament of mathematical knowledge. Here is time with its infinite gifts of moments. Here is matter with its atoms, each an infinite world in miniature. And here is life with its infinite activities. All these infinities may be comprehended in a single thought." But the following year, Paul Cohen-Orsted pointed out a severe flaw in Cantorian set theory. It was too broad. Given the current state of mathematical knowledge and laws, there were too many sets and therefore too much infinity. The reaction was swift. Mathematicians rejected Cohen's criticism, and Cantor was vindicated. But instead of feeling vindicated, he became convinced that his critics were conspiring against him. He felt betrayed, confused, anxious, paranoid, increasingly cut off from his colleagues. His mind began to fracture. There are other theories about what caused Cantor's mental breakdown. Some say that he was born a genius, but was pushed too hard as a child and then burned out. Others say that his strict upbringing left him with unresolved psychological issues. Still others say that Cantor's theory of sets was wrong and that he knew it. Cantor had always struggled with anxiety. In 1911, he suffered a nervous breakdown and spent a month in a hospital. During this stay, he came up with the idea of the continuum, which helped to stabilize his condition. 3 years later, however, he had another psychotic episode and tried to kill himself by slashing his wrists. He was hospitalized again and received treatment from Sigmund Freud's psychoanalyst, Max Eiting von Zellen. After months of therapy, Cantor seemed to recover. But in 1914, he killed one of his cats, dismembered it, and sent parts of it to his mother and sister. There's no record of any further psychiatric treatment at this point, but his behavior remained problematic throughout his life. Then, in the early 1930s, his health took a turn for the worse. He developed heart problems, probably as a result of high blood pressure. And in 1937, he had an appendix operation. Around the same time, his increasingly reclusive nature drew the attention of his neighbors. They complained about the stench coming from his apartment and about the rats that scurried around outside. Cantor responded by putting a sign on the door that said, "Beware of dog," even though he didn't own a dog. He also began hoarding newspapers, piling them up on the floor so high that it was difficult for him to move around. According to one of his colleagues, Cantor was becoming more and more childish. He threw tantrums, slammed doors, and sometimes spent all night talking loudly to himself. In June of 1937, when Cantor was 64, he was admitted to the psychiatric unit of Mount View Hospital in North Brother, New York. A colleague visited him there and found him in an advanced state of disintegration. Cantor couldn't recognize him. He talked incoherently about rats and dogs and asked whether they believed that he was Napoleon. The colleague would later write, "The great mathematician, the pioneer of modern abstract mathematics, the man who had done so much to develop the present century's most significant mathematical concepts, was now a confused, frightened old man who was afraid to leave his bed for fear of being taken for a walk, that is to say, for fear of being taken away." Cantor died in the hospital 3 years later at the age of 69. Cause of death, coronary thrombosis. Though Cantor was institutionalized for the last 3 years of his life, he wasn't forgotten. In 1949, the British Mathematical Association set up the Cantor Prize to award the best graduate student paper in the British Isles. The prize has been awarded annually ever since and is now awarded in the United States as well. But as time went on, Cantor's story took on a life of its own. In 1967, the psychologist Paul Piskarev claimed that Cantor's schizophrenia had been caused by his discovery that infinite is actually bigger than infinite. This claim was popularized by the science writer Philip J. In 1981, the mystery writer Robert Van Gulik used Cantor's story as the basis for a murder mystery novel called The Man Who Was Cantor. And in 2016, the comic book writer Neil Gaiman wrote a fictionalized account of Cantor's life called The Heart of All Matter. Now, none of these stories is true. Cantor's schizophrenia predated his discovery that infinite is actually bigger than infinite, and while his discovery may have contributed to his mental breakdown, it definitely didn't cause it. Schizophrenia is a complex illness with multiple interacting causes, including genetics, brain chemistry, and environmental stress. But people still want to believe that Cantor's discovery of the biggest infinity broke his mind because it makes for a great story. It's the story of a man whose brilliance and eccentricity made him an outcast. It's the story of a man who stared into the abyss of infinity and found madness staring back. It's the story of a man who unlocked the secrets of the universe and became insane in the process. But that's not the real story. The real story is more complicated and a lot less interesting. But maybe that's the real infinity. It's hiding in plain sight and we just don't see it. Maybe some infinities are just beyond our comprehension. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.